What's up, Ego Hackers? This is CS Joseph, and this is Season 14, Episode 13. Intimacy between the ENTJ archetype and the INFP archetype. People are like, whoa, 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 CS Joseph, what are you doing? Changing up all the order of the lectures that you're releasing. Yeah, I am. Why not? You know? But I'll probably only do it for Season 14, Part B, which is Episodes 9 through 16. But yeah, we've talked about ENTP, INFJ, Pedagogue relationship, ENFP, INTJ. We did ESTJ, ISFP, and ESTP. What's after ESTP? ESTP, ISFJ, and now we're doing ENTJ, INFP. So kind of getting back into the intuitives after having done some of the sensors thus far. So pretty fantastic. Gosh, I really like walking on this trail. You know, I'm sure it annoys a lot of people, but honestly, I need some sun. Vitamin D is a good thing. And I'm fasting again, and just really fasting while being in the sunlight is just a very fantastic experience. Takes a lot of my stress away. I think I'm going to sleep pretty well for my nap today, so we'll see how that goes. So yeah, never a bad thing to take care of myself. Like, for example, you know, I used to have a 9-to-5 job, and that was pretty crazy, having a 9-to-5 job. I will never ever work a 9-to-5 job ever again. I'd rather be homeless than give up the opportunity to not take a nap whenever I want to. So my personal freedom is so much more valuable to me than, chasing after the almighty dollar. Besides, the almighty dollar is just a fake construct anyway. But for some reason, actually a lot of reasons, ENTJs and INFPs see that as something that's actually valuable, because they're all about creating value and understanding the value of things. These two types together, they do that. The thing is, though, is that like all other pedagogue relationships, these two types have struggles. So again, let me present to you what the pedagogue relationship is all about. So a pedagogue relationship is just like a golden pair. It has the highest sexual compatibility, like a golden pair does. The sex is amazing. The chemistry is amazing. The fireworks is amazing. And people get sucked into pedagogue relationships very easily, just as much as they would get sucked into a golden pair. And that's awesome. My personal favorite relationship is definitely Pedagogue, for sure. I really, really enjoy it. Even like just being just friends, regardless of any sexuality being involved, even if it's just among friends, Pedagogue relationship is just a truly defining relationship. And like I've said many times before, the conflict that comes as a result of having a pedagogue relationship comes from the lack of emotional compatibility, while there's also high sexual compatibility present between the two people involved. Okay, that's awesome. Well, that conflict breeds a struggle, and then as a result of that struggle, it allows a person to get to a point where they're growing a lot better, they have cognitive integration, they're on the path to enlightenment, and they can become the best version of themselves, because if they're willing to listen or put aside their own emotional needs for the sake of the other person, and then as a result of both of them doing that at the same time, those emotional needs can actually be met, but there has to be some hoops that they have to jump through to get there. The process of jumping through those hoops, those hoops specifically actually provide a lot of growth. Like, for example, oftentimes we talk about neural pathways and neural plasticity and cognitive gateways, right? Well, a pedagogue relationship actually really helps improve one's cognitive gateways. And it helps them get from a less expedient point of view with their cognitive transitions and a more meaningful point of view with their cognitive transitions. So at the end of the day, each person really truly has that benefit. And that benefit is something amazing. Because when you're looking at it, they're able to become, like a more meaningful person. They become more fulfilled. They can become happier. They become wiser. They become more responsible. And then eventually they can become more loving and angelic, right? And it's a direct result of the pedagogue relationship. Because every person within the pedagogue relationship, they are each other's teacher. I used to be in a sexual relationship with an INFJ. It was excellent. It was absolutely excellent. The problem is that I didn't know what I knew today, and I didn't have the tools to be able to meet her emotional needs. And she also didn't have the tools to be able to meet mine, probably because I couldn't explain it to her. And as a result, our relationship just completely fell apart. But it was excellent up until that point. Yeah, and then eventually, she lost respect for me, and because she didn't believe either I was earning her respect, or she didn't believe that she was good enough for me to love her anyway, so then she just lost respect for me as a result, which kind of sucked. But I learned so much from this woman, and I've learned so much from any INFJ that I've ever had any encounter with in my life. I'm very thankful to have known INFJs and to be their pedagogue and teach them some things that they've also taught me, and it's a really amazing exchange in like every way. They help my child function become less childish, and they help it turn into a parent function for my subconscious, right? That's a great example. But that's what every pedagogue relationship does, and that's no different from like an ENTJ or an INFP. An INFP loves ENTJs because the INFP is able to mimic ENTJ behavior so that the ENTJ, I'm sorry if I said ESTJ, I meant ENTJ. The ENTJ is very responsible with what they want and responsible with their decisions. It makes them very decisive people. Then the INFP person can look at that ENTJ and kind of mimic that decisiveness. That way they're no longer as critical towards what they want for themselves, which is what causes INFPs to not be decisive. And then as a result, the INFP becomes more decisive. And then they're able to get out of their comfort zone, get out of their shell, be who they are, and actually obtain happiness and obtain wisdom instead of their default state of ignorance. Because that's what the INFP default state is. Ignorance, ignorance, ignorance. And it's that ignorance that leads to their vice of treachery. Well, the ENTJ, they are able to understand that they can actually come into contact with somebody who will not abandon them and someone who is truly, truly loyal to them. Even sometimes the point where it's regardless of how the ENTJ performs. Oftentimes ENTJs have the burden of performance with their expert sensing child, and they just have this need to be able to perform for other people. But sometimes they're not always able to perform. And sometimes when that happens, the INFP, with their strong endurance and their strong ability to subsist and persevere, even through hardship, they can still be there like an immovable object for the ENTJ's unstoppable force. And this allows the ENTJ to actually be at peace with themselves and actually be comfortable with themselves, because it's like, hey, I don't want to be abandoned. I'm afraid of being abandoned. I mean, just because you have SE child, you still have fear of abandonment. You still do. It's just the fear of abandonment is far worse than SE inferior. So, the fear of abandonment goes away, and also the ENTJ can finally be at peace, and they're no longer looking, behind their back, waiting to be betrayed. Even though technically INFPs can be the most treacherous of all the types, but they can also be the most loyal of the types. And it doesn't take much for an INFP to be loyal to somebody, especially since the INFP SI child loves receiving those SE child experiences, those shared experiences with the ENTJ. So for example, there is an INFP woman I know, and she recently actually got with an ENTJ. She actually messaged me how it's like the greatest thing in the world. She also messaged me saying that it's also the hardest thing in the world too, but she absolutely loves it. And she described to me how they actually got together. So this INFP woman, following my advice, she decided to go to a bar. I'm like, yeah, ENTJ, man, they go to bars. They even run bars. That's just what they do. I mean, it is what it is. Oftentimes, the ENTJ men are also like recovering alcoholics from, and have been in AA and have sponsored many people in AA and take AA very seriously. But that's another story. That being said, she went to the bar. I told her to dress into the nines as much as possible. And she did. She got her hair done. She didn't know what outfit to get. She actually hired somebody to help her with her style, and she was trained to like pull out Pinterest, and gave her some INFP celebrities and how they dress and whatnot, and various shows that they're acting in, or movies that they're acting in, or just their regular dress, etc. And this INFP mimicked all of those people's styles basically, and then actually had somebody teach her a little bit on how to improve, herself makeup wise, which is cool. But yeah, definitely working on her appearance. She also was endomorphic, and when I first met her, she was technically obese. And then about half a year later, after experimenting with keto and lifting and whatnot, and having that self-discipline, she dropped a ton of weight. She was a lot smaller and definitely a lot more attractive. Well, I had her go to a bar, and I told her, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're not going to speak to anyone. You're going to be by yourself. You're going to dress in the nines, and you're going to sit at the bar and literally put yourself in the location of the establishment where there would be the most attention, the absolute most attention. But you're not going to speak to anybody. The only person you'll speak to is the bartender. And I told her, if you're hungry, eat a meal. If not, get yourself a drink. If you don't drink alcohol, that's fine. Get water with lemon. It doesn't matter. Which, if an INFP woman is sitting there with water and lemon, the ENTJ man will spot her and be like, wait a minute, she's not even drinking. What's up? I got to investigate. Kind of makes it, even a little bit more mysterioso and a little bit more enticing, a little bit more desirable. You know what I'm saying? But I said, just pick your favorite drink and sit there and sip on it while reading a book or playing on your phone, or have a tablet or something. Maybe bring your laptop, do some work. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Just show up. That's all you got to do. Well, sure enough, Mr. ENTJ comes up to her, and he's like doing the classic ENTJ pickup line. Hey, what are you up to? Well, needless to say, she got laid that night. And she got laid many times since. I mean, so did he technically. But the point is, this can be done. And she did it. She positioned herself. She worked on herself. She improved herself. She was not stuck in her comfort zone anymore. And as a result of that, she finally got herself an ENTJ man. And they've been in a relationship now for like 3 months. And she said, hey, I'm really happy. Cool, I'm glad he's making you happy. Yeah, he rocks my world. No man's ever rocked my world like he does. He's very firm, and I respect that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Glad you're happy. So, at that point, she messages me later, and she's like, well, hold on. There's some problems. we got some problems. I'm like, okay, well, what is it now? He's such a douchebag. He can be so mean to me sometimes. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that happens. Men can be mean. I mean, technically, statistically, women are attracted more so to mean men than nice men. That's just legit. But she started complaining about him, about how, and eventually I could tell, it's a lack of emotional compatibility. The sex is great. The shared experiences are great. The connection's great. But in terms of being able to meet her emotional needs or his emotional needs, something was happening. And I figured out that the problem was with this woman is that she was being disrespectful to her boyfriend. And why is that? Well, it's because she was putting her values and her value systems above his. And he was putting his status and his reputation above hers. She explained to me that he was constantly making himself look good at all times, but really wouldn't do any of that for her. He wouldn't make her look good. Oftentimes she's like, well, I feel like I'm just another one of his options. I feel like he doesn't actually really care about me. He's always talking about himself. He's always talking about his achievements. But it's like, my achievements don't matter. My achievements are not a priority, right? And it's like, oh, what do you do? And then she started saying, oh, well, that made me feel really unwanted. Unwanted because if he truly wants me, then he'd go out of his way to talk about how great I am to his friends. He never talks about me to his friends. I always talk about him to my friends, but he never does it with his friends. In fact, I've never even met one of his friends. I don't even know who his friends are. And I haven't met his family, I haven't met anybody. And honestly, I don't feel really important. Maybe he's just using me, right? Well, she had this emotional meltdown in a session with me, and I'm like, okay, well, that sucks, but that's not actually what's happening here. Because, as people have this problem, it's called cognitive projection, where you are projecting in your sexual relationships, in your intimate relationships, your golden pair onto other people. So she was expecting this ENTJ man to behave like an ENFJ. Consequently, he was expecting her, naturally, subconsciously, to behave like an INTP, and she's not. And, I guarantee you that if I coached him, he'd be like, well, I don't know if she ever even thinks highly of me. Maybe she thinks I'm just some kind of horn dog who's all about, trying to get his next lay. You know what I'm saying? And he was feeling pretty bad. I guarantee you he was feeling really bad because none of these people's emotional needs are being met. Well, that's the problem with the pedagogue relationship. Emotional needs aren't being met, I mean, in the bedroom, they're fantastic together. Every time he touches her skin, even the lightest touch, she reacts, and he gets off on that. He absolutely loves it. And she loves being touched. It makes her feel wanted and desired. And he's very wanty and very desirous fellow, constantly. And she admitted to me that they, as per my recommendation, she goes out of her way to ensure that they have sex every day. And to the point where she told me that he even admitted to her that he's never had so much hot monkey sex with a woman in his entire life. Never has. Usually, it's like, maybe once or twice a week or whatnot, but every day was pretty new for him because it seemed like some of the other women were not really sexually interested. Well, this ENTJ, I mean, he's pretty cool. He's not exactly someone that I would say is a beta, but at the same time, he could definitely work on getting more alpha traits out there, but I think any man could technically work on more alpha traits, let's be honest. But regardless, he's a business owner, very capable, and funnily enough, even though he met her in a bar, he actually owns and operates a bar, and a restaurant. So all about that food service mindset, I guess, from a professional standpoint. So yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. He also does a lot of volunteering for the community, and not so much volunteering, but more of like, he's just a very generous fellow. He always gives back to the community. He even helped to like fund a park for children, etc. And I think that's one of the things that actually attracted this INFP to him, is because he was so generous, etc. And she's just a dental hygienist. You know, that's what her background is and whatnot. And she lives by herself. She makes enough money to like have her own place, and was really independent, you know, but you know, she's 26, 27 in that age range. And he's 34, etc. So it kind of I mean it's working out, you know, they're having sex every day. The problem is, like, emotional compatibility is just down the toilet. And remember, folks, you know, when it comes to pedagogue relationships, this is the obstacle. This is the biggest obstacle that you have when it comes to dealing with relationships. So, as with every pedagogue relationship, what you end up having to do in order to have success in your pedagogue relationship is get to a point where you're willing to reverse emotional roles. Now, I will say that it is actually really hard for this particular pedagogue relationship to actually do that. The reason why is because the judging heroes, so basically like FI heroes, TE heroes, FE heroes, TI heroes, and when it comes to their pedagogue relationships, they often have a bigger struggle, a greater struggle for emotional compatibility than when it comes to you know, perception hero types like NE hero, NI hero, SI hero, SE hero, etc. It's actually a lot easier for those types to get over the emotional compatibility issue. The reason why is because with their perception functions being heroic, you know, there's even far more benefit for sexual intimacy in those kinds of pedagogue relationships than necessarily for judging heroes. It's because, you know, secondary functions like child and parent are being used for sex instead of like the hero and inferior functions. You can get the heroic and the aspirational in the bedroom, whereas you're dealing with a parent and a little kid in the bedroom, you know, when it comes to that. So sexual intimacy in a pedagogue relationship for judgment heroes technically on paper is not as good as it is for perception heroes. So I mean, just keep that in mind. This is why, you know, the pedagogue relationships with judgment heroes end up having a greater emotional need than they have a need for a sexual need, you know, sexual intimacy. And perception heroes end up having a greater sexual intimacy need and not as much of an emotional need. This is a concept I haven't really talked about very much when it comes to pedagogue relationships, but it's technically true. And this is one of the reasons why having a straight-up romantic compatibility algorithm is so complicated, because you have to keep track of all of these nuances. Luckily, in the dating app that I'll be releasing soon, it will cover all of these little nuances, and combine that with users' freedom of choice, we'll be able to create an ideal outcome for anyone using my software. So we'll make sure that your guys' needs are being met when the time comes, I promise. Now, going further though, it's important to understand that, like, you know, when it comes to these relationships, when it comes, you know, especially if you're judging heroes in a pedagogue relationship, you really have to focus all your energy on reversing the polarity of your emotional roles. Okay? So here's like the actual problem that happens. The INFP ends up putting their values over the values of the ENTJ, which leads to the ENTJ going demon mode. It makes their FI inferior feel really bad about themselves. And it's like, wow, you're not even allowing me to value myself, because you're telling me that the way that I'm valuing myself is wrong. And so they go super demon mode. And this leads to the ENTJ being insanely uncaring towards the INFP. And this happens regardless of gender, male or female. On the INFP side, or on the ENTJ side, the ENTJ puts their own status above that of the INFP. This leads to a lot of problems. So yeah, keep that in mind. ENTJs often make the mistake in their pedagogue relationship with INFPs that, like, yeah, I'm putting my status above you. And INFPs often make the mistake of putting their values above the ENTJ. And it leads to conflict, which can lead to a lack of love or a lack of respect. And then when that happens, everything falls apart. Don't forget that from a relationship standpoint, every relationship is based on a yin and yang equilibrium of love versus respect. Men need unconditional respect from their women. Women need unconditional love from their men. That's just basic. You know, the problem is in our feminist society and Western culture, women are not exactly conditioned to provide unconditional respect, but men are conditioned to provide unconditional love. This is why, in my opinion, when it comes to relationships, technically women are more of the offender than men are in Western society, that is. People think, oh, that's crazy and you're sexist and you're misogynist. And I'm like, no. Check out this statistic. Who initiates the divorce process more often? Is it men or women? 70% of divorces are actually initiated by women. You can look this up on the U.S. Census Bureau. Verify it. Okay? That's a pretty interesting stat. You know, and if it's an ENTJ man, oh, they demand respect. They don't suffer anyone being disrespectful to them at all. If it's an ENTJ woman, she looks like she cares about respect so much. But in reality, she really actually cares about love. She just doesn't want to, you know, look like a housewife or look like... She just doesn't want to look bad because my reputation, my status, my titles, etc. And sometimes the ENTJ women can let their pride go to their head in that regard. It's really annoying and not something I recommend. And, you know, I've enjoyed a sexual relationship with an ENTJ woman. She was 11 years older than me, but she was still very fantastic. And I haven't heard from her in many, many years. Really sad. But not much I can do about that. Plus, I'm a married man. I would rather my attention go to my wife than anyone else, as it should be. And, you know, this ENTJ woman, she decided to leave, and that's on her. That's not on me. So, it's all good. She's the one with her NI parent who has to take responsibility for making her own decisions. Well, it's important that you ENTJ women out there know that you actually really do have a need for love. As much as you try to kid yourselves that you care about respect more, the day you're given respect is the day that you find out it's not as important as you thought it was. That's just a fact. And if you disagree with me, I'll be honest with you, just get over yourself. It's a fact. You can't get away from human nurture. As much as you are all about your nature, you still can't get away from nurture. No one can. No one can escape nurture. That's why, you know, with everyone's being conditioned the way that they are within this feminine primary social order, it can really be problematic for women as well, not just for men. This is one of the ways. This is why ENTJ women struggle so much in actually being able to find a man they actually respect. Because the men that they're predisposed with having relationships with, they're crusaders. And statistically, crusader men are the most doormatted men. They also buy into the feminine primary social order, and they end up making their women their mental point of origin instead of themselves their mental point of origin. And this really, really frustrates ENTJ women. Especially since ENTJ women have this reputation of being emasculating. A reputation of, tearing down men, not allowing men to be men, etc. So ENTJ women often feel alone and not valued. Men don't think highly of them. They're not given opportunities to perform or practice for men. So they constantly are questioning whether or not they're actually good in the bedroom to begin with, because they don't get much practice, because they can't have a real relationship. And any, if not all, relationships they get, really, at the end of the day, are just shallow. There's no depth. And inside of themselves, even when a new one-night stand of theirs is banging them, they're slowly and secretly crying and shedding tears while he's inside of them. It's really terrible and very sad. But that's just really the reality of how the world works. And honestly, it's the masculine women, the masculine types, that is ESTPs, ISTPs, ENTJs, and INTJs. Those four types, in terms of women, end up suffering more as a result of feminism than any of the other types of women out there. Now, that is just conjecture on my part. Just conjecture. An opinion. So, don't quote me on that, and take that with a grain of salt. But those women really struggle the most, because again, they get accused of being emasculating to other men within their relationships. Pretty sad, you know. It happens to them all the time. Now, if the Crusader men would actually, have self-respect and make themselves their own mental point of origin, they wouldn't exactly have that problem. And then as a result, the ENTJ women would respect them, and then all of a sudden they can have a relationship based on depth, which is fantastic. Something ENTJ women need. INFP men, while they are also at risk of being doormatted, they don't really allow others to doormat them so much, because their FI hero can get in the way. And it's like, ooh, my vice of treachery can show up, and I'm just going to dump you on your head, and I'm going to betray you because you deserve to be betrayed, because you're not making me comfortable or safe. And you obviously don't care about me, and you think so little of me because of your behavior, so why do I even bother being loyal to you in the first place? Why do I care? That's something that, a lot of people don't consider when it comes to, INFPs or INFP men, etc. So, moving forward, back to the relationship. The ENTJ puts their own status above the status of the INFP. The INFP puts their own values over the ENTJ. I actually talked about that recently in Cognitive Transitions for INFPs, which is Season 22, Episode 16. Because I'm like, yeah, INFPs have this problem where their extroverted feeling nemesis gets in the way, and they're not willing to go outside of their comfort zone and potentially adopt a value system of somebody else, because they're afraid of the consequences. And it's, uncomfortable for them. It takes them out of their comfort zone. Because of that, they become stagnant and they stop growing, right? Do you think that is going to make the INFP desirable to the ENTJ? Nope. And whatever good sexual equity they have, and all that sexual rapport that they've built up with each other, that'll be spent like that. Because the INFP was being unwilling to adopt the ENTJ's value systems, or at least consider and trial and error the ENTJ's value systems. This is something that just needs to happen. Well, to go even further, the ENTJs are all about their status, but they don't really realize sometimes, because that when they're all about their status and trying to make themselves feel better, that they're making everyone else around them feel bad because they're extroverted feeling demon. And when it comes to being in a relation to the INFP status and their reputation gets stomped by the reputation and status of the ENTJ. How to solve this? Well, the ENTJ could pipe the status through extroverted sensing child. So what they do is they pipe extroverted feeling demon directly into extroverted sensing child, where they understand that making their INFP feel better, or increasing the status of their INFP, for example, is actually part of the experience that they are to deliver through their SE child to the SI child of the INFP. So they have to learn how to do this. It's like, okay, I'm able to emulate FE because my SE child knows that when I'm giving an experience to my INFP, that experience includes me speaking highly of them to other people, me introducing them to my friends, me taking them with me to places I want to go, and me talking about them to other people and my family, and that way you as the ENTJ with your reputation are in the public eye. The INFP gets to be in the public eye with you, and that's all about the shared experience. This is how an ENTJ can solve that problem, because it's able to meet the emotional need of the INFP, and the INFP gets to walk around feeling like you think highly of them because every shared experience you produce, you are also increasing their status by proxy, or as a byproduct of that. Super important. But most people are too ignorant of that. Everyone is so focused on meeting their own emotional or sexual needs that they don't even pay any attention to the other person that they're in a sexual relationship with. It's really annoying, and it's disrespectful. It's also unloving. Think about that, guys. INFPs, you have to develop the habit of trial and erroring the value systems of the other person. Super important, right? Super, super important. This is what I mean when I'm talking about trading emotional roles. So, it is the INFP's duty, because they have the highest extroverted feeling, to actually be as caring as possible and adopt the value systems and trial and error the value systems and try out the value systems of the ENTJ. If you do not do this, your relationship will fall apart, and you will get no benefit to the pedagogue relationship. Be careful. Guys, also, please watch the other pedagogue relationship lectures. It's not always the same every single lecture, and I put some tidbits that apply to all relationships into each one of these individual lectures, so make sure you're paying attention to all of them, and stop being those typical INFPs who only focus on things that are important to them. The fact that you do that proves why you are not suitable to have a good relationship with an ENTJ, just so you know. Okay? So you might want to wake up and figure that out. You might want to have self-respect and actually go out of your way to see everything from the perspective of other people instead of just your own perspective, because that's really annoying. It's especially annoying to the ENTJ. Wake up. So to go even further than that, ENTJs, since you have TI nemesis, you have the highest logical thinking and whatnot, it's on you to say things to your INFP like this. Let go of your status. Let go of your pride. Let go of your reputation. And say the words to your INFP, to their face, and to people they respect or people they know, and say, I think highly of you. Make true-false statements, and make it a habit of making a true-false statement. Like, I don't care if you have to set up an alarm on your phone because of how forgetful you people are. I don't care. But set up an alarm on your phone that says, I need to tell my INFP that I think highly of them in some capacity. Create like a little journal and write down the date and time of every single I think highly of you statement that you make. I think highly of you because you did this. I think highly of you because you did this. I think highly because you did this for me. Or you're loyal, or blah, 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 blah. Insert adjective here. Okay? Verb, adjective, doesn't matter. Like, write it down. Set up alarms on your phone, and then send them a text message or something, or tell it to them to their face. I don't care if you have to make a system out of it. I don't care how fake you feel. I don't care. Meet their emotional needs. Damn it, you effie demon. So, As a result of switching those emotional roles, you two will have the most fantastic relationship. The ENTJ, once they see that their emotional value systems are being adopted or experimented with by the INFP, it allows them to develop their value systems even more such that they are able to reach a higher level of creative expression. And then they're able to develop their ISFP subconscious faster. And this ENTJ ends up believing that they have the support of their INFP, like this rock that they can stand on. And this INFP then will be there for them, support them in any of their creative endeavors. Something the ENTJ has never had in their whole life, right? Conversely, when the ENTJ is going out of their way to say, oh, I think highly of you, and meet that emotional need of their INFP, their ESTJ subconscious starts to develop. And that ESTJ subconscious is more organized, wiser. They have a lot of financial capabilities, financial management. These people become amazing people, right? And that's what's really important. And a lot of people don't get that. They just don't get that at all. Well, I've just told you the tools. I've just given you the tips and tricks. This is just how it works, you know? Yeah, have sex every day. Yeah, keep developing your sexual relationship. But if you do not use these tools, your emotional relationship will fall apart. And then your woman will feel like she's not receiving the unconditional love that she wants. And then your man will feel like he's not receiving the unconditional respect that he's looking for. Women in this society, like I said, just don't understand that they have to give unconditional respect to their men, and it's super frustrating. The expectation is for men to give unconditional love. Where is the expectation from women to give unconditional respect? Okay? Well, you do that and you communicate love and respect by following these tools. Understand the type of the person that you're in a relationship with and be there to meet their emotional needs. See, a lot of people just don't get this, but, you know, I've revealed all this now to you so that you can. And you can meet their needs. Even if you have FE Demon, you can make an FI Hero feel better. Even if you have TE Inferior, you can still provide valuable input and have a valuable opinion. Even though your ENTJ's opinion is already so highly regarded around you. ENTJ men, or ENTJs in general, doesn't matter, men or otherwise, go to your INFP, empower your INFP's voice. Give them a voice. Hear their input. Just listen. Spend time listening to their input. They might actually know something. Guess what? They can have TE aspirational. That means their opinion has the potential of becoming the most valuable opinion on the earth. Why would you not listen to that? You'd be foolish and ignorant if you didn't. They are, after all, one of the 16 types who has the potential to produce and create the most wisdom out of everybody else. A wise man has many counselors. Make sure you're paying attention to that. Also, INFPs understand that even an ENTJ, regardless of their flaws, can become even more principled than you. Definitely try out their principles and see if they actually work. Maybe you'll be able to build a better philosophy and improve the futures of fellow human beings specifically because you weren't afraid to try out the value system of an ENTJ. It's super important. Very important, folks. Anyway, I think that just about covers it for these two people and within this intimate relationship. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please leave a comment below. I'd like to hear your feedback on it. And next episode, I believe, is ENFJ INTP. So I'll see you guys the next time that lecture releases or the next parenting lecture that's about to drop. So with all that being said, folks, I'll see you guys tonight.